Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jhonna, and this is Jhonna Unfiltered. We're continuing the series on MBTI types as narcissistic parents, and today's type is one that I think catches a lot of people off guard. Because from the outside, this parent often looks like the cool one, the fun one, the interesting one. We're looking at ENTP, also known as the debater type. Before I get into it, the usual disclaimer. I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. Nothing in this video is a clinical diagnosis. This is my learning diary, based on research and patterns that I find genuinely worth exploring. Being an ENTP doesn't make anyone a narcissist. Most ENTPs are not. They're often wonderfully engaging, genuinely curious people who make life more interesting for everyone around them. But when narcissistic patterns layer on top of the ENTP style, the result is something that's simultaneously charming and deeply destabilizing. And that combination is exactly what makes it so hard to name. Let me start with what ENTP actually means. ENTP stands for extroverted, intuitive, thinking, and perceiving. People of this type are known for being quick-thinking, verbally skilled, and genuinely energized by ideas and debate. They're natural devil's advocates. They love looking at things from unusual angles. They can be very funny, very charming, and very stimulating to be around. A healthy ENTP parent is actually wonderful to have. They encourage the child to question things, to think independently, to be creative and bold. They don't need the child to be a certain kind of person. They're genuinely interested in who the child is becoming. But when narcissism enters the picture, those same traits become something quite different. The love of debate becomes a tool for psychological dominance. The wit becomes a weapon. The charm becomes a performance for an audience. And the child, who is supposed to feel loved and safe, ends up living in a home that's unpredictable, exhausting, and intellectually destabilizing in a way that's genuinely hard to explain to people who weren't there. Let me explain the core pattern. The ENTP narcissistic parent organizes family life around their own intelligence and need for stimulation. They need to feel that they're the most interesting, the most capable, and the most right person in the room. And in a family setting, that need gets applied to the child constantly. Everything becomes a debate. Everything gets picked apart. And the child learns very early that simply expressing a thought or a feeling isn't safe, because it'll be examined, challenged, and likely dismantled before it's finished. What makes this type especially disorienting is the inconsistency. ENTPs naturally get bored with routine. They're energized by novelty. So one day they're fully engaged, exciting, fun, present. The next day they're completely checked out, uninterested, somewhere else mentally. And the child, who can't predict which version of the parent they'll encounter, develops a kind of constant alertness. Always monitoring, always adjusting, always trying to be interesting enough to hold the parent's attention. Let me talk about the mother and father versions separately. The ENTP narcissistic mother tends to be very charismatic. She's the one other people's kids think is the cool mom. She's witty, spontaneous, and socially engaging in a way that makes her hard not to like. But inside the home, that same charisma gets used differently. She's unpredictable in her moods and her standards. What made her happy yesterday might annoy her today. What she praised last week might be dismissed as unoriginal this week. And the child, trying to keep up, never quite figures out the rules because the rules keep changing. She also tends to treat the child's privacy and autonomy as negotiable. She doesn't necessarily do this maliciously. In her mind, everything is open for discussion, open for exploration. But for a child who needs to feel that their inner world belongs to them, that openness can feel like an invasion. There's no safe space to simply feel something without it being examined or turned into a conversation topic. When the child is emotionally vulnerable, this type of mother's response is often a joke, a witty observation, or a reframe that shifts the focus back to something more intellectually interesting. She doesn't mean to dismiss. But the effect is that the child learns their pain isn't something this person knows how to hold. So they stop bringing it. She may also frame the family as unique, as people who think differently, who don't follow the crowd. And that can feel good for a child in some moments. But it also creates pressure. Being part of this family means being impressive, being interesting, being clever enough to deserve the label. And a child who doesn't naturally express themselves that way starts to feel like they don't quite belong, even in their own home. The ENTP narcissistic father is probably the most verbally dominant version in this series. He debates everything. He turns every conversation into a contest, and the contest always has a clear winner, which is him. When the child has an opinion, he challenges it. Not to help the child think more clearly, but because dismantling an argument is how he demonstrates superiority. And the child, who doesn't have the years of experience or the verbal skill to match this, consistently loses. And consistently learns that expressing their own view isn't worth the effort. He may also be openly competitive with the child in ways that are uncomfortable to watch from the outside. If the child shows talent in something, he might subtly undercut it rather than celebrate it. Because a child becoming more capable in some area feels threatening to his position as the most capable person in the room. This doesn't look like deliberate cruelty. It looks like pushing the child to do better, or pointing out where they still have room to improve. But the timing and the pattern communicate something different. He can be extraordinary in social settings. Charming, engaging, someone everyone wants to talk to. And then come home and be dismissive, argumentative, and emotionally unavailable. That contrast is genuinely confusing for a child. The person everyone outside admires and the person who lives in their house are so different that the child can't reconcile them. And when they try to tell someone what's happening at home, they often aren't believed because the public version is so compelling. Let me look at how financial situation changes the dynamic. A wealthy ENTP narcissistic parent tends to use money and experiences as a form of love bombing. They'll take the child on adventures, buy impressive things, create moments that look extraordinary from the outside. But these gestures are tied to the parent's need for an audience and for admiration. They're done when the parent is feeling generous and engaged. When the parent is bored or distracted, the gestures disappear. And the child learns that love is something that appears and disappears based on the parent's internal state, not on anything the child is actually doing. A financially struggling ENTP narcissistic parent shifts the leverage towards sacrifice and grand unfulfilled plans. They'll talk about things they were going to do, dreams they gave up, futures that were possible. And the child absorbs the message that they're the reason those things didn't happen. The debt isn't financial. It's existential. The child owes the parent a certain kind of life in return for what the parent gave up. The substance-dependent version of this parent type is particularly chaotic. ENTPs are already somewhat unpredictable in their engagement and mood. When substances are involved, the shifts become more extreme and more frequent. The parent who is charming and engaging when stimulated becomes something harder to manage when not. And the verbal wit that was already being used as a weapon gets sharper and less controlled. Things get said that can't be unsaid. And the parent often won't remember saying them, which adds another layer of disorientation for the child who has to carry the memory of it alone. Let me talk about what children of this type of parent tend to carry into adulthood. They often become verbally skilled. They had to survive conversations with a parent who treated every exchange as a debate. They learn to think on their feet, to construct arguments quickly, to read a room. Those are real skills. But they come with a cost. They often have genuine difficulty trusting their own memory and perception. Because this parent rewrote things so consistently and so convincingly, the child grew up uncertain about whether what they experienced actually happened the way they remember it. In adult relationships, this can show up as a reluctance to trust their own read on a situation, always second-guessing, always wondering if they're misinterpreting something. They may also carry a deep fear of being boring or ordinary. Because in this home, ordinary wasn't tolerated. Cleverness was the currency of worth. And that belief follows them into adulthood as a persistent anxiety that they're not interesting enough, not smart enough, not compelling enough to deserve the people around them. They tend to be very good at adapting and performing. They learn to hold attention in a home where attention was only given to what was interesting. But underneath that adaptability is often a real difficulty with just being, with not performing, with knowing that they don't have to earn their place in a conversation or a relationship every single day. The genuine insight that this parent's curiosity and questioning style might have produced in the child is real. Some children of ENTP narcissistic parents develop genuinely sharp, independent minds. They learn to question things. They learned that conventional answers aren't always the right ones. Those gifts exist. And the work of recovery isn't about rejecting all of that. It's about learning that they're allowed to have those qualities without having to use them to win something. That they're valuable when they're quiet, when they're uncertain, when they don't have a clever answer. Before I close, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a parent or someone important in your life who seemed exciting and engaging to the outside world, but who was genuinely destabilizing to live with up close? And how did that shape the way you handle conflict or disagreement as an adult? Drop it in the comments. These are the conversations that matter, and your experience might help someone else finally put words to something they've been carrying for a long time. Thanks for watching. If this video resonated with you, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I want to be upfront and share that I use this text-to-speech voice to tell my stories because as a full-time ESL teacher, I have to be very careful with my vocal cords. Managing vocal nodules means I have to save my voice for my students, but I didn't want that to stop me from sharing these unfiltered thoughts with you. I'm Jhonna, and I'm currently working toward my goal of 1,000 subscribers so I can finally monetize this channel and turn this passion into a sustainable part of my future. This is my diary of solo living here in the Philippines, and your support, whether through a comment or a sub, helps me keep this channel growing. If you would like to help out even more, you can check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. My dogs definitely appreciate the love. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thank you for being such an important part of this journey. I'm Jhonna, and I will see you in the next one.